But this kind of goes right in line with what we want to accomplish today and communicate. So please pay special attention to this. I did send out a document, a 2-page document to everybody indicating kind of some steps regarding the active shooter training. But Brian's going to kick us off and take us through this month's training. So Brian, thanks for joining us and doing this again.
Yeah, sounds good. Good morning, everybody. So today's topic is active shooter. So there's going to be a lot of information in this one today, folks, just because of how important this training is. It is becoming, unfortunately, a growing concern in our law enforcement communities and business owners alike, because these events are so hard to predict and they're so hard to contain once it happens. And we're going to take a deep dive into some of that as well, just so we all have a high level understanding of what an active shooter means for us, right? And the basic and most important part of this all is, how do we survive it? Okay, that's the key, is our own safety. And we're gonna give you tips and tricks and all kinds of information to try and mitigate that. Okay, so the biggest thing with active shooter training now, in my career in emergency services, I'm blessed to say that I've never been involved in an active shooting, but we have what's called a TEMS program in the emergency services world, which means it's a tactical EMS, meaning that we shadow SWAT team members or tactical members to protect them, right, from injuries and stuff. And I've done a fair amount of training with that, with local law enforcement. We've also done some training with the FBI counterterrorism active shooter teams as well. So I'm happy that I can give some more insight to this based on my experience, which I think is going to help us all very much. So the biggest thing that we want to know, folks, is we want to run, we want to hide, and we want to fight. Okay, so what we're going to do in this presentation today is we're going to break down each one of those: run, hide, and fight, and really get to the meat and potatoes of what those mean. Okay, especially for us being put into these scenarios unexpectedly. So we're going to have to really kind of think on our toes a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start off with just some key statistics from the FBI, right? This is a rising incident. Unfortunately, it is happening more often every year. We have found out that most events last about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, that's about how long it takes until either the shooter is neutralized or the threat is neutralized. So what that means is, okay, on the bottom, I like to point this out to folks. Law enforcement in the United States, right, their average response time is 14 minutes. What does that mean? That means that it could be 5 minutes for you and it could be 20 minutes for somebody else, right? Depending on where you're located, depending on where the law enforcement officers are. There's a lot of things that can play into that. So 60 to 70% of these incidents end before the police even arrive. All right, that's something to really take into consideration, because this plan that we have come up with is working. All right, so we just have to keep it going. That's the biggest part. Workplaces are a very common target. Okay, and looking at your facilities, right, with your lumber yards, you have a lot of open air, a lot of open space there. And we're going to talk about that coming up here in a little bit, and some of the hazards that throws at us, and we want to be able to mitigate them. Okay, so the first topic, run. All right, what does run really mean? Okay, it's not just, oh, I hear something, I'm going to exit quietly, right? No, it's recognizing that there's an issue. First of all, okay, the most common way that we recognize the issue is we hear it. We hear the pops, we hear the gunshots, but what happens is people are like, what was that? Was that a firework, or was that a truck backfiring, or what was that? That hesitation right there that most people feel, because you're not expecting these incidences to happen, right? So you start hearing suspicious noises, gunshots, whatever the case may be, and your suspicion starts to grow. And what happens is then we become curious. So we want to try and confirm what those noises are, but in reality, what we want to do is start our exit plan. Okay, We want to make sure that we have a clear plan, that we have a clear exit, all right? And we're gonna talk about that a little bit more in depth, okay? So does that make sense to everybody so far? I know it's kind of a broad term there, but we want to make sure, all right, that once we start hearing something, or even if your gut is starting to tell you something, that something's not right, okay? Listen to it. If something feels like a threat, all right, err on the side of caution and start moving, all right? So how do we recognize when we should really start to go? All right, the
Hey,
first thing.
Brian. Hey,
Yes.
Brian, can I interrupt for 1 second? There's some people that are trying to get in and they need to be accepted to get into the call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Let me look here. I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
Okay. I'll have
Hey.
them retry. Thank you.
Yeah, have them retry, and I'll keep that screen up on my side here so I don't miss it, just in case it may be timed out on them. But I show 49 people are in. Is that what you
Okay.
show?
That's what I show. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Yep, I'll keep an eye on that for sure. Sorry about that. So, recognizing when to go. All right, that's probably the most important part here. All right. You definitely don't want to wait, right, for the perfect information to come in. Somebody come running in saying there's a shooter in the yard, right, or something like that. What should trigger your move, all right, are the sounds of gunshots, maybe screaming or a sudden rush of people running, right? Someone urgently telling others to run, like, get out of here. There's somebody here with a gun, whatever the case may be, right? Or if your gut, and I really emphasize that if your gut is saying something's not normal, something, don't hesitate. All right. Hesitation is the biggest risk here. Okay. Because what we have found is that seconds matter. Okay. That's the biggest takeaway. All right. Next is choosing your escape. All right. That is another big part. All right. Where do we want to go? You want to go to the closest, safest exit. Now that means that might not be the door right across from your office that takes you out to the lumber yard or out to the parking lot. You want to run away from the violence, right? Avoid moving towards that sound of danger. Okay. I know that and I put this in here on purpose. I know it seems obvious, but chaos messes with direction. I'm telling you right now, it's so easy to get turned around. That's why it's good to have a plan in place. Okay. If your main path is blocked, switch immediately. The biggest thing is don't freeze. Keep moving. Okay. Don't try and force your way out. Just keep moving. All right. Think about out of the way, not just away. Okay. And we're going to talk about that too a little bit more when we get to the hide part. Okay. So move quickly. All right. If you can safely, stay low. All right. You don't want to become a target. In most active shooter scenarios, the shooters always go for the easiest targets, right? It's the people who are maybe like looking out, like what's going on. They're curious, or they come out to see what's going on, right? They want the easiest targets. We have seen many times through the FBI database and other stuff is even locking a door is enough to deter some of these people, okay? Because they're there to cause maximum damage as fast as possible. They don't take the time or the effort to really search, okay? Now, a caveat to that is we are seeing some statistics coming through now that most of the active shooters are known. We know who they are. They're disgruntled employees or an upset family member. That's usually the case, and they have specific targets that maybe they're going for. So again, this is just a blanket coverage training, right? So many different variables, so many different scenarios could happen. But we want to make sure that we have at least the core reasons and education and training to make sure that we stay safe. So keep your hands free. That's another big thing that we see a lot of people do, and it also delays their exit, right? Because they want to grab their bags or they want to grab items that they want to take with, stuff like that. The only thing we really advocate that you grab is your cell phone. And that's going to come into play in just a few minutes, okay? Follow walls or known pathways instead of running into open areas, right? Why? Because it gives you coverage. It breaks that line of sight from the shooter to you. So you basically are escaping unseen. That is the goal, okay? Now, this is where it gets really tricky, folks, okay? This is where we have this is where we see the most common problems when it comes to this, okay? Encourage other people, all right? Because there's a lot of times where when this happens, maybe you're with 5 or 6 people, you're hunkered down in an office, and it's like, we want to leave, but we don't want to. We're not sure, all right? Just always err on the caution of running, okay? Encourage others. Let's go, follow me, right? Please help other people if you can. Avoid crowded bottlenecks in doorways and narrow halls, all right? Single file. In this scenario, moving orderly and slow is fast, okay? Because you don't get bottleneck up in doorways or narrow hallways and stuff like that. And remember, people are going to be panicking, and understandably. So sometimes it can cause issues. And we have seen also people freeze. It's your body's natural reaction to such a shock to the system, like what is going on, and people, they freeze. And when you freeze, if you're in the middle of an exit, you block that, and people kind of stack up behind you trying to get going, and that's where we see a lot of people get injured or killed from that. So once you're outside, keep going, all right? Put as much distance as you can between the violence, right, and where you are. Go for barriers, buildings, trees, stuff like that, to try and disrupt the sight of you from the shooter to you, right? You want to make it hard on them, basically, so that you don't become an easy target, all right? Don't just stop right outside the building. Keep going, okay? Find a place of safety, another building, maybe a car, places like that, depending on the footprint and the layout of the area, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? And after we're done here, I will open up for any questions, and we can answer some of those then, all right? That sounds good. So next topic, right, on the list is hide, okay? And what does hide really mean, all right? It means breaking the line of sight, folks. Denying access, maybe, if that's something that you can do, barricading doors, stay undetectable until it's safe or help arrives, okay? Picking the right place is crucial as well, folks, okay? The reason why this is so crucial is because you don't just want to hide, you also want to hide somewhere where you have cover. Cover meaning that it can stop bullets, right? So concrete walls, right? That's kind of the best scenario. Heavy wooden walls. You want to avoid glass, right? If your office is all glass, that's not going to do much for you, okay? So pick a good spot. If you have to hunker down and hide, make sure it also gives you some cover, okay? But also, I really advocate to people, when they find a place to hide, while you're there, in the midst of all this haste that's going on, try and maybe plan out an exit strategy just in case you have to run, okay? But like, avoid thin cover, curtains, flimsy partitions, cubicles, stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that we want to avoid, okay? Because we want to put as much dense material between us as possible. So not only just to hide, but also to have protection, okay? Does that make sense? All right, and once you're in that safe place, okay, if you're in a barricaded room or you're in a spot where you feel you're comfortable, that is when we want to start calling for help, okay? The reason we don't want to do it right away is because the main goal is to get you to safety first, all right? Find a place to hide, run if you need to, and then call 911, okay? Be clear and be brief, all right? Because you want them to be able to get there as fast as possible. Let them know your location, be specific, right? And what you saw or heard, and a description if you can, all right? Some of the common mistakes people make during these scenarios is we wait too long, okay? Make sure that we are moving fast. Remember the statistics in the beginning, all right? These scenarios happen very fast, but they also end fast, okay? And most of the time, maximum damage is caused at the beginning, okay? So don't wait for your exit plan. If you're in any doubt or any question, go, okay? Going back in for belongings, we've had a couple of scenarios where people wanted to go back in and get things because they thought it was clear and it was not, okay? So what does that mean? That means the only time you get the all clear is from law enforcement, all right? Let them tell you when it's okay, and then we will go back in after that's done. And most of the time, folks, they won't even let you back into these buildings. They have an investigation to do. It's a crime scene. So please don't go back in there. You could contaminate that scene as well, all right? Freezing when the first exit is blocked. That is a very common thing that we see people run into, because you kind of get to the point where, okay, this door's locked or I can't get out. Now what? And now you start panicking. All right. Head on a swivel. Always be observant and find your secondary exit. Okay. Stopping right outside instead of creating distance. That's another thing that we've seen happen and that we've learned from, is actually, like your emergency actions plan, like for a fire or like a bomb threat. We all want to go to a meeting point, right? So we can do a head count, make sure everybody's there. But we have seen that sometimes those large gatherings turn into a target. All right. So make sure we disperse and put enough distance between us as possible. Okay. This next one is fight. All right. Fight. This is where it gets really, really hard. Okay. First of all, I like to tell people, when it gets to the fight point, we need to have a little bit of a reality check here. Okay. This means if you are to this point, it is the last resort. Okay. If you have to fight, means that you can't run, you can't hide safely anymore. Your life or others is in immediate danger. All right. This isn't about winning a fight, folks. That's not what this is. This is about creating a chance to survive and escape. All right. And what does that mean? All right. This means disrupting the threat. Okay. How do we disrupt that threat? The most common way that I've seen most people handle it, like if they do active training, scenario-based training, people gang up on the shooter, right? If there's 4 of you and 1 of him, maybe there's enough of you that you could control him or bring him down and get the gun out of his hands, whatever the case may be. But what you want to do is break that threat long enough that either A, we can escape, or B, we have enough people there to help hold them until law enforcement arrives. Okay. Forcing them to retreat. That's another thing we see when, like in schools, like they're starting to teach teachers and even the students to grab whatever they can find and throw it at them as hard as you can. Staplers, whatever the case may be. What does that do? That creates confusion with the active shooter. They're not expecting any type of pushback until law enforcement arrives. So the more you fight, the more you throw stuff at them, you could even create enough time to give yourself and others a chance to get out. Okay. Mindset. This is important. Once you have to fight, commit fully. All right. Make sure that you are fully committed, because it is the absolute last chance. Okay. Be decisive and aggressive. Hesitation gives the advantage away. So you don't want to do that. Act fast, act quick. All right. The goal is speed and surprise, not a prolonged struggle. Okay. What we want to do is flipping from avoid to act now. All right. This is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do, me included. I don't ever want to be in that scenario, right? But when it comes down to them or you, it's going to be you, right? And you're going to want to fight for that. So that's what we want to take away from it. But it is a very, very challenging mindset to have, and that's why these trainings are so important, right? We want to keep the trainings very, very broad, right, to cover most spectrums, but also the core values of it, right? Run, hide, fight. Okay. The first thing we want to do is run, folks. Always, always. Okay. So if we have to fight, teamwork, right? If there's more of you around, right? Usually active shooters, there's usually only one. Okay. And if there's a couple of you, we could take them down, hopefully, right? Act together, overwhelm from different angles if possible, right? Assign quick roles. You grab that, you go high, etc. Does that make sense? Even if it's just a real high level coordination, it can make a big difference, right? Use what's around you. You're not empty-handed, right? You're in an environment. There's going to be stuff around. Sticks, maybe if you're outside. In the office scenario, like staplers, all kinds of stuff, pens, whatever the case may be, right? Try and find something like that. Distant tools, this is something that the FBI pushes, and this is also something that OSHA pushes, but personally, I don't want to keep a distance if I'm going to attack. I want to get right up onto them and try and overpower them the best I can. But there are certain tools that we can use that will keep space between us, right? Let's say if it's not a gun active shooter, maybe it's a knife, right? Like he's going around trying to stab people. then distant tools become a lot more reasonable, right? And a lot of times what people use for that are chairs, right? That's one of them. Coat racks is another one too. If you have a stand-up coat rack, that's something you can use to push the person away, stuff like that. Barriers is another really good thing to keep in mind as well. If you can, right? Barricade doors, stuff like that. Just try and slow the movement down. And then distraction. That's actually a very valuable tool. These folks are in such a psychosis mode that not very many active shooters survive. I will tell you that right now. So we don't have a lot of chance to really kind of get to the core cause of a lot of it. They're usually self-inflicted. They end it, or law enforcement or people fight, right? We fight back. So try and slow that movement the best you can. Try to distract them the best you can. That actually works really well. All right. At the point of where anything is available, use it, whatever you have. Okay. Because we want you to be safe. That is the core of what we are doing here. All right. What happens right after the shooting, though? Once we're safe, right? Once you're at a safe place, maybe at a different business location, law enforcement is there, all that stuff. Just keep moving, okay? Once you're in a safe place, all right, find cover. Avoid gathering of crowds is a real big one, okay? Because we've seen that they're actually becoming targets, all right? This is when we want to call 911 like we mentioned before, all right? But make sure that somebody does, okay? It's very easy in this type of scenario with all the chaos, emotions, all that stuff. It can be something that gets overlooked. But again, just make sure we're very, very clear on how we communicate to 911, okay? That's very important. All right. So this is a part of it that a lot of people really don't understand, okay? Unless you have been through it. And that's why I like to talk about it, okay? It's the mental side, all right? And this usually comes after the fact. It can come after the fact, within a few hours. It could even be a few days, even up to a week. We've had some people, right, come back needing mental care for this, all right? Because your body goes through about 100 different changes chemically in your brain, adrenaline, emotions, all this stuff is going through you, all right? And in the moment, right, adrenaline can mask stress. It can also mask injuries, okay? So be mindful of that. Once your body starts calming down and you're like, oh, my leg is starting to hurt or my arm is starting to hurt, right? Adrenaline's pretty remarkable when it comes to that. So in reactions, right, some things that you can expect a lot of people have: shaking, confusion, emotional swings, all right? All normal. All right. It's no different than, if you stumble across a car accident, then it's a bad scenario and you start shaking and adrenaline's rushing. All that stuff is normal. It just takes time to calm down, right? Talk to someone that you trust or a professional, and we can help with that. And your employer can help with that, right? To find you a professional to come help, maybe counsel you or get through that. But it is very important to take care of the mental side of you as well, again, because we're focused on keeping you guys safe and healthy, okay? So some real big takeaways, okay, that I really, really want to hit home for you guys, all right? It's about being prepared, not being scared. In the event of an active shooter situation, it's going to be so different every single time. So that's why we want to really hit home these couple key things. Number one is make your decisions quick. All right. Trust your gut. All right. Because many times these incidents end before police arrive. And I know for a fact in some areas in Wisconsin, I mean, the police response time is under 5 minutes, right? But there are some places where it's longer than that. So we have to be prepared. Okay. So a couple other key facts I want you guys to really take away from this. These incidences are increasing. All right. Most last between 10 to 15 minutes. Oftentimes police arrive at the after or at the near the end. Okay. Workplaces are common locations, and you guys have storefronts and you have large open lumber yards, right? Some scenarios could be where the shooter starts in the yard and works away, because maybe it's easier to get into the yard than it is the office. So I'm not quite sure what kind of gated security access you guys have, but in the lumberyard, with that big open area, that's where you want to really find a good place to hide. Okay. Or if you can run safely out of the view of the shooter, that's also a really good idea. Okay. But there's a lot of things you can hide behind in the lumberyard, but just keep in mind, right? Once you get into the buildings, into the offices, right? Most walls that are just drywall, okay, they don't really stop bullets very easily. So make sure that we are getting somewhere where we're hiding where you have good solid cover as well. Okay. So here are some common mistakes, folks, that we see happen. People wait too long. People wait too long because they're not sure what they're hearing. Is it fireworks? Is it maybe a car backfiring, or whatever the case may be? But I'll tell you one thing, in a mass shooter, all right, or an active shooter, it's not just going to be a couple pops. It's going to be pop, 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 pop. Okay, because they're trying to maximize their damage as fast as possible. So if you hear bursts of pops, right, even a couple, one or twos, and they don't sound quite right, act. That is when you want to start moving. Okay. The other thing that we see a lot of people do is they go back in for belongings. Please avoid that. Okay. We'll get to the belongings after this is all taken care of and everybody is safe and sound. All right. Freezing when the plans change. All right. That's another thing that happens very, very often, folks, and we want to avoid that. If plans change, adapt and keep moving. All right. And then stopping too close to danger. Once people think, oh, I'm outside, I'm safe. Okay. Nope, you want to keep going. All right. Put some distance, put some really solid infrastructure in between if possible. Okay. This is where we ask, does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, anything specific we want to talk about to your sites? Now is that time.
Brian, you did a wonderful job with this. If people don't want to speak up on this, if you have individual questions, you can send them over to me and I can get them forward over to Brian to get them answered. If any of you guys think that it's never going to happen to us, not at Bliffert Lumber, not in our locations, you're wrong. It can happen anywhere. Gas stations, lumber yards, office buildings, it can happen anywhere. I have personal account of an active shooter event that I was involved in. I can share that offline if anybody has interest in it, but I'll be honest with you, it is a very scary situation. I know what we're talking about today is stuff that we'll think never happens to us, but this is a necessary thing for us to communicate. Like I mentioned, we had one of our locations that had an event right next door to them that we were part of it. And they acted with tremendous response to protect the employees. So I was very happy with how that location did it. We just want to make sure we get the information out to everybody on what to do. So with that being said, Brian, if you don't have anything else on this, again, thank you so much for presenting this. This is a very important topic for us. Questions, email them over to me. I'll be more than happy to get them to Brian to answer. Managers, if you could please send in the signed sign-in sheets at the completion of the 2 p.m. Call, that would be greatly appreciated. With that, everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day, okay? Stay safe out there.